It's always the case that an earlier technology is used by a later technology, a later art form. This is it. But the important thing is, because the Vedic text was considered to be the most important thing, therefore Natya is associated with it, so that people are able to go to Natya with a certain seriousness. So Natya becomes sacred. It does not remain just a mere entertainment.
That also, in terms of rig, as you told, there were 8 ways of locking the text. That's not even losing one Sandhi Samas or kind of a tradition which rig gives us. Was this tradition also followed in Natya Shastra while memorizing the Shastra? Was that 8 types of locking the text so that we keep the text intact? Is that tradition also followed in Natya Shastra?
No. What you are referring to are the 8 Vikritis or methods which were used to preserve the Rig Vedic.
Yeah.
Now, that was only for that text, Rig Veda. That technology was not used for anything else.
Okay.
Because other things were written down.
Yeah.
Because the Vedic text was never written down, and they thought that the Vedic text under no circumstances should undergo any loss. Therefore, they invested so heavily into it. No culture can possibly invest the same way into every text. Look at the conditions in those times when people didn't live to be 80 years or 90 years average age, when half the women died in childbirth. Look at the investment that must have been needed to preserve these texts. So how could you possibly use this technology for all kinds of texts? There was no need. It was done only for the Vedic. I mean, that's a primary question I ask some of my friends, Western Indologists, like Michael Witzel and others, that if they all came on horseback, then could they preserve this just on the riding saddle? 8 kind of Vikritis and all these things. No, this needed institutions. This is exactly what Dr. Kapila Vatsyayan pointed out to Michael Witzel when he came to India International. That look, this is a highly complicated system of composing the text, preserving the text, making the mantras, the different chandas. And it requires generations and generations. You know how long you take to preserve one Ashtapadi, and how much effort, how many people learn out of 20, one is able to perform it properly. Out of those 20 who are able to perform, one is able to transmit to a student. We have to see these things from a very analytical eye to make an assessment of what is being said between the lines, and to see it in the proper historical perspective. So it was only for the sake that the Vedic technology of preservation was only for the Vedic text. The Natya technology has a different logic because it has a different public. And whereas the Vedic art form requires a preservation, the theatrical art form requires the opposite. It requires change. Because people want new things. You don't want to watch exactly the same performance year after year. You want creation. You want adding things. You want variety. So here the logic is different. Here the logic is to provide people with something which has a diversity of taste. That is why Natya is talking about the whole of India. Later on, we'll go on into certain concepts which are given here. Pravritti, who likes what in which part of the country. Oh, it's very well laid out. Because now you want as much variety as possible, as much diversity, so that people are entertained, and therefore you develop different genres over a period of time. So the purpose is developmental, expansive, whereas the Vedic purpose was preservation. Any more questions? All right. Now I shall just take 5 minutes to conclude the session. We have said several things in the first chapter. What happens now is the most interesting thing, that when Vedic tradition, Natya is created, and as I said that it cannot be done by the gods because gods don't experience pleasure and pain. So Bharat Muni comes and he performs, and what he performs is a horrible failure because there were no women performers in there. So then they said that unless you have women performers here, unless you have women performing, unless you have a combination of both the sexes, there can be no theatre. When the performance was done, Amrit Manthan, this was a performance which showed a fight between Sura and Asura Sangram. Then the Asuras became very angry when their defeat was shown, and they attacked the theatre, the place where theatre was being performed. A need was felt that there should be a theatre house to keep them out. You can read more of this on your own. I'm just summarizing the whole thing. The idea being that the audience should not watch things personally. That is, if I go to see a match where my nation is being defeated, then I should not think it is a national defeat. So in Amrit Manthan, when the Asuras thought that their defeat was an insult to them, then they complained to Brahma, and Brahma explained to them that you have to look upon the whole thing dispassionately. Very briefly speaking, although one can go on very deeply into this whole aesthetics of appreciation, and we shall later on in later chapters refer to this again. The idea is that you should be able to see what is being performed impersonally. So it should not be taken as a personal defeat. Devasur Sangram, therefore, is not, and the defeat of Asuras was not to be taken by the Asuras, should not have been taken personally. However, they did it, and therefore Indra said that we are going to protect Natya. How? By making a theatre house. By making that theatre house sanctified with divine powers. So here we have another story that theatre needs protection, that theatre needs patronage, that Natya needs patronage from people who are all the time trying to destroy works of art, that there will always be people who will get insulted and feel angry and behave like the Asuras. The Natya Shastra points out to this perennial problem with which we are living, and which, as you see in the news, constantly happens in our country, but it is not something which will go away, because that's an eternal situation. Everybody cannot be dispassionate. A real Rasika has to appreciate a work of art and to appreciate what the performer is saying. and to keep his or her predilections away and watch it, which the Asuras were asked to do. But because that does not happen, so the theatre house had to be made. And this afternoon, we will go into the construction of the theatre house, into the history of it, and what were the different parts of it. I'll not go very deeply into it because that's not one of your concerns. And it is largely a historical issue because the area of performance in the theatre house has immensely changed. But there were certain principles which were followed and which should be followed even now. And very often people overlook it, which creates a jarring note in the traditional performance. So if you develop that understanding, these chapters 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, they all become very relevant to you. So we break now for lunch, and we come back. Thank you very much.
Welcome for the afternoon session.
No, I'll take questions later. Yeah.
Now we request Bharatji to continue for the afternoon session.
Dhanyavad. So we come to the hardest part of the day. The lunch hour is necessary, unavoidable, and yet it creates a slight sluggishness. But if you are able to kind of overcome that, then the results are great because you have energy from food now. Yeah, but a little down so that I can. Is that okay, the sound now? All right. So we left at a point where the Asuras had something to complain. That you have shown the victory of the Devatas, the gods. Remember that in the Indian tradition, the Asuras are not eternally evil. They are just another kind because they both come from the same father. The mothers are different. So they complained nevertheless, and Brahma tells them that look, Natya is not to favor you or to favor anybody else. Na ekanta tato atra bhavatam devanam cha anubhavanam. It's not for one exclusively, because it is trailokasya asya sarvasya natyam bhavanu kirtanam. As a matter of fact, we look at the three lokas. And in ancient language, loka does not mean folk, like lok kala and folk art. It means heaven, martya lok, the terrestrial world, and the nether world. So whatever is there in this world, in the upper world and in the lower world, all of it is going to be represented. But how? Not just as it is. It is an anukirtan, which means I am going to recreate it. And it is a bhavanu kirtanam. I am not going to create everything that I see. I am going to see the inner soul of it, the bhava of it. So when somebody said, why is a reality show not art? This is exactly the reason. Because we are looking at the inner depth of it. We are looking at the inner meaning, and we want to represent that inner meaning. We don't want to have a detailed characterization of things as they are. So this was not an art which tried to represent things realistically. It didn't show how exactly the kind of costume people wore. It took that costume or that dress and then embellished it, made it into more of a symbolic thing. It was not a realistic representation of life as it was in those times. It was more of a symbolic representation. So he says, Brahma, that it is a bhavanu kirtanam, and what is it that is available? He says everything is available. There is no activity, no dharma, artha, whatever, which is not to be seen by you in, which would not be available to you in Natya. And Natya also has one great power. Theatre has one great attraction. That different kinds of people are able to find their own fulfillment there. So those who want to think of the other world, of parlok or of dharma, dharma pravittanam, there is dharma. For those who want to see romantic things, that romance is available. Kamaha, kamopasevinam, it's available there. And those who are aggressive, rebellious, they can see similar activity going on. So, no matter what is your nature, you will find that reflected. For the very simple reason that this is a representation of the totality of the world. So somewhere or the other you would find a character which is answering your preference. You can have a role model there, or you can find somebody whom you appreciate there. Which is not to say that you would identify with that person, or that you would strongly like and dislike that person, but you would see that kind of activity. If you are interested in philosophic discourse, then it will be available for you there. If you want to see just dance and little entertainment or a story full of romance. So he says that Nana Shilaha Prakartaya Shilan Natyam Vinirmitam Tasmat Lok Pramanam Hi Kartavyam Natya Yoktribhi. So the person who is going to produce theatre is going to produce all those activities, and people would be very happy to see this activity. And it's also very clear that in this particular art form, you use all other art forms. Small art forms and big art forms. So you want the best of music, you want decoration, you must know how to decorate, you must have an idea of architecture. And so they said that there is no particular art which can be left out from the field of theatre. Theatre is therefore a total art. Natya is a total art, and hence, in order to produce a good play, you must have a deep understanding of a huge number of arts. Therefore, the Natyacharya has to be a scholar, an actor, a musician, a poet, everything rolled into one. He must have a good idea of what things are like and what are the different arts and different artists. He must have an excellent understanding. Unless he has that, there will be no possibility of creating art. So they go on and they finish describing what is essentially Natya. But as I said, they come to the practical problem of performance being guarded so that people can come, understand, watch and enjoy. And for that, they will create a theatre house. Now, what were the theatre houses or ancient theatres in India like? As a matter of fact, Natya Shastra is the only evidence, because we do not have any theatre surviving from ancient times. You know, there are hundreds of ancient Greek theatres surviving, amphitheatres in the whole of Mediterranean. I have photographed about 35 of them myself, and in different countries and all that. So they are there for you to see, even in state of dilapidation, but they are there. And you can get a very, very accurate picture because they are all in stone. And stone preserves. The ancient Indian theatre was not a theatre in stone. It was made of wood. It was made of soil. It was made of everything which is perishable.